have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him, I just like, I guess my vibe is like, I hear him be like in a bad mood. And I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood. I've just been really stressed. I had so much work I was doing on my computer this morning.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I used to work at an organic juice bar, but I just quit my job.
Okay.
I was a nutritionist. That's my
That's
job.
cool.
And I just quit my job to travel across the country. And I'm trying to start a blog. I just have a blog and stuff. So I've been building my website. So I've just been really stressed, and he doesn't really believe that I could do any of it. So that's kind of been like a, I don't know, he's like down there. I don't know, we've just been fighting all morning, and he wouldn't let me in the car before. And then
Why wouldn't he let you in the car? Because of your OCD?
He told me I needed to calm down. Yeah. But I'm perfectly calm. I'm calm all the time, and he really stresses me out, and this is a rough morning.
So, tell me what's going on.
She just gets worked up sometimes, and I try and really distance myself from her, so like I lock the car and I walk away from her. What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website blog and everything, so I give her time, and we really had a nice morning if anything, but she just got worked up because we were trying to get going and get our day going because we want to go like arches before the stuff like that.
So some of you may be familiar with the individuals in those two clips. Some of you may have seen that full body cam footage. That body cam footage is from August of 2021. That was Gabby Petito and her partner Brian Laundrie. They were engaged at the time. You heard all the excuses coming from Gabby here. It's all her fault. I have OCD and I'm so mean and I get frustrated. She's pointing out all these qualities that he has told her that she has. They're travelling together and he has convinced her that she is just the worst person in the world. Her self-esteem was just shattered, completely destroyed. Not only that, but it had become such a codependent relationship that even after this fight, when they're telling Gabby that we're going to separate you guys for the night, she's like, no, we're a team, we have to be together. Now, this was at the point where their relationship was really toxic. He was being extremely violent. He had basically separated her from her family even before they went on the road trip. They had moved in with his family. Gradually, her self-esteem was whittled away. She's the one who worked her ass off to buy that vehicle to go on that road trip because that's what they wanted. Now, I don't know, neither of them are here to answer if that is something that was both their ideas originally or something that he came up with. But what we do know is that about 2 weeks after this footage, Gabby Petito was no longer alive, having been made that way by Brian because of DV. He then took her car, travelled all the way back across the country, back down to Florida to his parents' place, and then refused to answer questions in terms of where Gabby was. I think it took about a month before they finally found her. And that was only because of another YouTube couple who were vloggers and who had just happened to have driven past that vehicle in Moab when it was parked near the campground, which is where they eventually found Gabby. The reason I've shown this is to show you just how codependent these relationships can become. Gabby was at a point where she was miserable. But she was miserable because she believed that she was the person who was at fault here. She was the person who was the failure. In this case, she couldn't leave him. That was her vehicle. They were struggling in terms of finances because she quit her job so they could do this road trip. And they were all the way across the country. She never, even when this incident occurred, never told her parents what was going on. So in this video, I want to talk about what it is that keeps people in these bad relationships. I do want to say before I start, I have seen so many cases where a mother has chosen her partner over her children, and the result has been at the cost of the children's lives. And I cannot ever condone a mother choosing her partner over her children. So I do not condone the fact that Malehya chose Daniel over her children, because that is what she did. I understand the psychology of it. And I explained in my video the other day the many, many layers that exist in these sort of coercive, abusive relationships, which make it so hard for a person to get out of them. But at some point in time, most people have a reality check. Usually it takes something to give them a shove to get out of it. We know that the CPS visited their house in December. We know that Malehya had reached out to Cindy and was going to leave in March, I believe it was, a few months before the children went missing. And yet, at the end of the day, she still chose Daniel. I think Malehya's personality is such that the only thing that was going to push her to get out of that relationship was the death of a child. Sadly, I think Malehya is the kind of person who basically measures her self-worth by her relationships. We know she's allegedly already in a new relationship, according to Wade's daughter. And it sounded like that happened pretty quickly. She is always going to put her relationships ahead of her children. So while the purpose of this video is to try and dig into the psychology of why she chose to stay with him, despite what was happening to her children and despite what was happening with her, I do want to just really emphasise the fact I do not condone a parent putting their partner over their children. Not when it comes at the cost of their children's well-being. Certainly not when it ultimately comes at the cost of their children's lives. And this is one of the important reasons for us to keep this case out there in the public eye. Because just maybe someone who's in a similar situation will learn about this case, and maybe this will be the catalyst that pushes them to make the decision to put their children first. I can assure you that Malehya was probably minimising everything that was happening in her mind. Part of that would have been because Daniel was also minimising it or justifying it. So let's jump in and talk about the lies that keep people in these kinds of relationships. So the number one thing that you hear people say is, that's not the real them. They're not really like that. There's a reason they're like this. I would imagine that for Malehya, in her brain, he's not really like that. He's just stressed because of our money woes. He's only working 1 day a week. We've got enormous debt. He's like that because the children are particularly challenging. He's like that because I'm struggling after having Meadow and we haven't adjusted yet. I thought this text from Daniel was very appropriate. I love her more than anything. That will never change. I'm waiting for that chance to relive our first date over waterfalls and a walk on Big Island Beach with the Daniel you first met. She will know what that means. This goes back to this is not the real him. The real him is the Daniel that I fell in love with. And what you get in these relationships, especially when it comes to coercive control, at the beginning of the relationship, they're putting their best foot forward. They are on their best behaviour. They are masking any of those negative qualities that they don't want you to see. All you get to see is the good side of them. And in these sorts of relationships, you can bet that at the very beginning, there is so much love bombing going on. You are the best. You are the only one for me. You totally get me. We were meant to be together. I am so in love with you. All those sorts of things happen at the beginning of the relationship. You only start to see their true character the first time that you see them under stress. But of course you brush it off. Oh, he was just having a bad day. He was stressed out because they reduced his hours at work. You don't consider that actually the mask is starting to fall and you're starting to see the real person. And of course this is confirmed in your head because the moment they realise that they have upset you, the mask goes back on. So they switch back to being that fake person that they were when you first met them. The mask goes back on and all of a sudden they're love bombing you again. They're telling you how much they love you. This is the real them. That was just a one-off thing because they were upset and stressed over something. But over time, that happens less and less frequently. They only pull out that fake persona when things are really coming to a head. If they think you are going to leave, suddenly they're going to be super attentive again. They're going to be that person that you believe you fell in love with. They're basically only being nice to manipulate you. They're masking the negative parts of them so that you will not leave them. This allows them to maintain control. And of course, in these situations, the person who is at the receiving end of all this, they don't rationalise it. They don't sit there and think, well, this is not healthy behaviour. Someone who is healthy in terms of emotional, mental health, they still live by their morals. Even when they are stressed, they still have morals and boundaries. They might be having a bad day, but they're not going to turn around and abuse someone because they are having a bad day. But it seems like the person on the receiving end of that abuse always goes to that excuse. This is not the real them. They are just going through a stressful time. And of course, from that comes to the belief that when things improve, they will stop getting so stressed and everything will be back to normal. Thing is, what they don't realise is the normal is what they are now living. And then there's the belief that this person only does these things because they love you so much. They only criticise the way you cook because they know that you can become a better cook. They only criticise the way you parent because they just want to help you out and they can see how much you are struggling. They want to help you become a better person. They want to help you achieve your best. But the thing is, it shouldn't be like that. You should be in a relationship where you are equals. But the moment someone starts telling you what clothes you should be wearing, who you should be speaking to, all these sort of things that happen in these coercive relationships, straight away, they are not treating you as an equal. They are not treating you with respect. And you can bet that even though Malehya wasn't being treated as an equal, she still believed that he loved her so much that didn't matter. You can bet she never stopped to think about where she was in terms of his priority list. Because if we look at Daniel, number one on his priority list would be his mother. How do we know this? Because we have heard so much criticism from Janie of Malehya. We've heard Janie say she would ring Malehya when Jack had his boots off and his coat off. We've heard Janie criticise Malehya so much. Malehya was a bad parent in Janie's eyes. Well, clearly, for her to be able to do those things, for her to be able to make that criticism, Daniel accepted that. Daniel was clearly fine with the underlining criticism that came from her ringing Malehya and saying, hey, Jack's got his shoes off, Jack's got his jacket off. Because you can bet, based on Janie's personality, that that was not done in a friendly way. In the dockets, Malehya says that they were able to live there provided that Daniel helped out around the property, so helping out with fencing and stuff like that. But we never hear her saying that he's actually ever helped with the housework. She said at one point in one of her interviews with the RCMP, he was supposed to do some housework, but I got up and he hadn't done anything. She said he tinkers around the house late at night. So what she's telling us here is that his priority is doing jobs that are going to benefit his mother, not benefit Malehya. But in her eyes, that didn't matter because he loved her so much. I suspect that Daniel prioritised his friends above Malehya. You heard Dingbat talking about how Daniel would go to his place after work and hang out with Jordan, and it sounds like that was pretty much a daily occurrence. You have a girlfriend back home with 2 young children and a new baby, but after work you're not going to go home and help her out, you're going to go and hang with your mates. But Malehya clearly accepted that because she believed that he loved her so much. He probably, if she ever questioned about it, he probably was like, I just need to wind down after work and I can't do that because Jack and Lily are so full on. It would be something like that. But like I said earlier in the video, this also shows us Malehya's priorities. She chose Daniel over her children. She could have had a really nice house in a really nice suburb, somewhere where her children could grow up in a nice area, well looked after, if she was prepared to get a job or go and study. But she chose to move in with Daniel. Not only that, when he started becoming abusive towards her children, she still chose him over them because she believed that he loved her so much, clearly. And she probably also explained it away in terms of, it's just we're going through a bad time. He's stressed out. Or we hear so often from Janie about how naughty Jack was. So I would imagine that in Malehya's eyes, any time that Daniel raised a hand to Jack, it was Jack's fault. Daniel would have convinced her of that. The other lie, or another lie that would have probably kept Malehya there, would have been the belief that she wasn't doing enough. She wasn't trying hard enough to make the relationship work. You get this one-sided relationship, and the partner who is abusive would turn around and say, you don't love me enough. You're not showing that you love me as much as I love you. You should be doing more for me. You weren't there for me. This is why this happened. You didn't spend time with me. This is why this happened. They basically expect the partner to make all the sacrifices and compromises. They never make them, and yet that means if they're questioned about it, this person just doesn't love them enough. So you can bet that any time things weren't good between Daniel and Malehya, if she ever tried to question it, or even if Daniel sensed that maybe he'd gone too far, it would be put back on her. It's her fault. She's not trying hard enough to make the relationship work. She doesn't love him as much as he does, and that's why this happened. She made him feel bad because of this. And when that is happening, a person just believes that, well, I need to stay because it's my fault it's not working. I just need to work harder to make the relationship work. The other thing that's going to stop someone from leaving in a relationship like this is this learned helplessness. When they get into this relationship, they get put in a situation where the partner's like, I know what's best for you. That's why you should let me make the decisions and me be the one in control. And they will frame it in terms of, I do this because I care so much about you and I want the best for you. But at the end of the day, it's about getting what they want and having control. And they will gaslight the person. So Daniel would have gaslit Malehya into believing that she just didn't have the ability to make good decisions, and that she needed him to make the right decisions because her decisions were the wrong ones. He would have gaslit her into not trusting her gut instincts. So gradually, any time that she did something that was her decision, he would pick that apart and show it as being a bad decision, so that over time she believed that she was incapable of making good decisions and she needed him to do that. And when you're in that situation, then you are going to convince yourself that if you leave that person, for starters, it's probably a bad decision because it's not something that you can discuss with them. But also, if you leave that person, then things are probably going to go badly for you, because you're not going to have them there to help you make everyday decisions. And they've convinced you that you're not capable of doing that on your own. And then there's the situation of the narcissistic victim. What do I mean by that? Basically, if you are evaluating that person, if you are making judgments, you are being judgmental. They are suddenly the victim. And in these situations, if things go wrong, it's your fault. If you're judging them, it's your personality flaw. It's not a flaw with them. So what you get is a situation where suddenly the controller, the person who is in control, shows you that you've got all these flaws, all these things that are wrong with you. And you need them to help you get by. So when we talk about Daniel and Malehya, we heard Malehya say, or we saw in the documents, Malehya said, you know, Daniel's a good parent with the kids. He helps out when she becomes overwhelmed. You can bet that becoming overwhelmed is actually something that he has created through criticism. By criticising her parenting, convincing her that she is incapable of being a good parent. And so she needs him to step in and take in that role. We've heard Janie claim that Malehya wouldn't go into town unless Daniel went with her because she couldn't handle all the kids at once. We've heard Daniel claiming the kids wouldn't respond to Malehya. They only responded to him because she didn't know how to get them to do the right thing. They did not respect her. Well, you can bet where that comes from. That is a situation that he created himself. So for Malehya, the thought of leaving him and winding up with 3 children when she's been told that she's incapable of managing those children on her own, that would have held her back. Maybe those times when Daniel allegedly gave Jack a black eye or punished him too hard in some way, maybe at those moments Malehya would think, okay, this is not working, I need to leave. But Daniel would have convinced her so thoroughly that she is not a good parent that he would basically gaslight Jack. It would be Jack's fault. There's probably a good chance that a lot of these black eyes and things occurred when Malehya wasn't there to witness it. And we probably did have excuses like, it was Lily. If these kids were afraid of Daniel, Lily's not going to speak up and say, actually, Daniel did that. So what you get is a situation where Malehya probably believed that these times when Daniel over-disciplined the kids to the point where they were injured, she probably believed it was her fault because she wasn't a good enough parent and she created these behaviour problems with her children in the first place because of her poor parenting. So, in her mind, rather than thinking, I need to get these kids out of this situation, she probably thought, if I leave, I'm not going to be able to cope with these kids on my own. And I believe too that if what happened to these children was the result of over-discipline, that would explain Malehya's silence. Because she would feel guilt and shame over it, because over the 2-3 years they were together, he would have made her believe that the problems with the children's behaviour were her fault because she was a bad parent, and that it was therefore her fault when he hit Jack because Jack had never learnt how to behave properly. It's all about reframing it in their mind to make them believe that actually you're not doing anything wrong. Daniel most likely convinced Malehya that it's nothing that he was doing wrong, it's about her never learning how to parent those children properly. It's about those children not learning how to behave because she never taught them to behave in the first place. But in my opinion, Malehya had to have wanted to believe that when it comes to her children. Because you hear of so many cases of controlling abusive relationships where the moment things go wrong in terms of the children being harmed, the mother snaps out of it and goes, that's it, that's over for me, and they leave. Now, I'm not saying that that's something easy that every single woman can do, but Malehya must have known on some level that the treatment that her children were getting wasn't right. But I think something that also factored into that, it sounds to me like once Meadow came along, Meadow became the focus of Malehya's attention. I think had Daniel done something to hurt Meadow, that would have been where Malehya drew the line. Now, if it was only Janie saying these things, then I would question the validity of her saying that when Meadow came along, Lily and Jack went on the back burner a bit. But if you remember, I asked Belinda to do some audio for me leading up to Jack's birthday. And one of the things that she mentioned was that when Jack was a baby, Lily got a little bit jealous of Jack. So when they were at Belinda's place, Belinda would carry Lily around and give Lily a bit of extra attention. She said she didn't mind because Lily was her princess. So that certainly seems that there is a history with Malehya where the new baby is the novelty and the older baby, older child or older children in this case, get put on the back burner. And we hear, according to Janie, everything about Malehya is Malehya having Meadow on her hip. Malehya couldn't search because she had Meadow. Even Logan talking about how originally Logan was going to take Meadow to her place, but Malehya had never been separated from her. So there had to have been on some level a willingness from Malehya to accept Daniel's version of reality, that these children were naughty and needed disciplining. And again, this ties in with the narcissistic victim. If early on in their relationship she had questioned him or said to him, don't do that, you're too rough, or that was too much, he would have put it back on her. He would have basically criticised her for being too critical, and he would have basically blamed it on the children. So that after 2 or 3 years, Malehya probably did believe that Daniel's way of controlling the children was necessary. Again, I just want to reiterate that I find it unforgivable that a parent would allow that to happen to their children, regardless of what they're being told. If you're in a relationship and your partner is injuring your children, your partner is leaving marks on your children, that is not normal. That is not good parenting. That is when you need to draw the line and say, this relationship is over. Okay, so while we're talking about children, the other reason why Malehya stayed, and probably one of the biggest reasons why Malehya stayed, would have been Meadow. First of all, she already had a failed relationship. Jack was really little when she left Cody. And you can bet that that is something that Daniel probably worked at in her brain. On one hand, he probably blamed a lot of the faults that he made up that Lily and Jack had. He probably blamed a lot of them on Cody. They're just like their father. So if Malehya ever spoke about Cody, Daniel would have twisted it and used it as an example of why Lily and Jack were such bad children. But not only that, he would have used that whole thing of Cody not stepping up and being a parent to these children, and that's why they're so naughty, because he never stepped in and acted as a father, and until I came into the scene, they didn't have a father figure. All that sort of stuff. He would have pushed that onto Malehya so that when Meadow came along, Malehya would believe that it was in Meadow's best interests to be in that family, that cohesive family relationship, to have a father figure there. And I'm willing to bet, based on everything we know about Daniel, that he was probably love-bombing Meadow as well. He was probably showing Malehya how much he loved their new baby. So in Malehya's eyes, if the relationship was not looking so good, well, hey, look at how good he is with Meadow. Got to make this relationship work for Meadow's sake. And of course, if, as it appears, Meadow became Malehya's priority, then yes, her priority would have been to make sure that everything was good in Meadow's world. And if that meant staying with Daniel, to give Meadow that stable home, despite what was going on with Lily and Jack, then that's the choice that she probably thought she had to make. So she probably thought she had to try and encourage Jack and Lily to behave better, and she had to work harder on the relationship because they had this baby now, and that meant that she had to make it work. Now, one of the biggest things that keeps people in these kind of relationships is this belief that staying is easier or better than leaving. When they think about leaving, they're only thinking about it in terms of their current situation, and it's that whole limbic brain kicking in. They're looking at short term. They can't see ahead to the future. They can't see beyond that initial struggle. So what they're looking at is, where am I going to live? How am I going to have the money to do this? I'm going to need to get a job. I'm going to be alone. And I'm going to have to parent the kids on my own, which, in Malehya's case, clearly it seems like Daniel convinced her she was incapable of doing that. All these things are going to seem like huge obstacles, not just because she'd be looking at them as like one big thing, as opposed to small obstacles that over time are going to diminish. They would be an obstacle that would appear insurmountable. I can't leave because I've got nowhere to live, and I've got no money, and I don't know how to look after the kids by myself. They start to stack up like a brick wall, and it seems impossible. You know, part of this is the isolation. She's become isolated from her support network. Daniel, it appears, put a wedge between her and Cindy. Obviously there were problems with their relationship already, but you can bet that he worked on all those flaws and made the relationship seem, or even be, even worse. You can guarantee that he would have pointed out all the problems that existed between Malehya and Cindy. Now, it seems pretty clear that Malehya and Wade didn't have a good relationship, So in Malehya's mind, she probably thought, I cannot go home to my mother's house. We know Patty was selling her house. So in Malehya's mind, she probably thought she couldn't go there. I mean, what you've got to understand here is this learned helplessness. So over the 2 or 3 years that she was with Daniel, she wasn't learning to think of solutions to problems. She was learning that she could not cope with problems and that she needed him to fix the problems. Her self-esteem would have been at rock bottom. She probably didn't believe that she would be able to get a job. She probably didn't believe that she would be able to cope on her own, that she would be able to manage the children on her own, feed the children on her own. Essentially, when someone is in a coercive, abusive relationship, they do believe that they are incapable of functioning without their partner, because that's what they have been trained to believe. And when we look at Malehya, we look at how reliant she was on Patty for funds. She booked up so much money on Patty's credit card. I don't think Malehya ever learnt financial independence, financial responsibility. So she probably never had to worry about paying bills, buying food, any of these things. And you can bet that while Daniel would not have said no to them exploiting Patty in the way that they did, at the same time, he would have used that against Malehya. Look at you, you can't even earn your own money. You need your grandmother to help you get by. He would have made sure for Malehya that there was a sense of shame any time that she took money from Patty. You can also bet that if there was any instances where Malehya said, I am going to leave, that Daniel would have played on those insecurities. Well, where are you going to live? Your mother's not going to want you there. Well, your grandmother's too old to have 3 children running around in the house, and are you going to just live off her? He would have made it so difficult. And then there's the whole commitment thing. I committed to this relationship. I need to stick to it and make it work. You can bet that in order to make Cody look even worse, and in order to maintain control over Malehya, that Daniel probably quite often pointed out that Malehya already had this failed relationship. In his mind, he wouldn't equate it to his failed relationship. Well, hey, guess what? We've both had failed relationships. No, because his ex-wife, he would have some really good reason why that didn't work out, and it would all be her fault. But Malehya, he would certainly blame it on Cody. But also, when he needed to get those claws in and make sure that she recognised that she wasn't working hard enough on their relationship, he would bring that up. Our relationship is going to fail, just like your relationship with Cody failed, because you aren't trying hard enough. Listen to you criticising me. You're judging me unfairly. This is why your relationship with Cody failed. Look at the mess in the house. You're not trying hard enough to keep the house clean. This is why your relationship with Cody failed. So she would, any time there was something that came between them, it would have always been put back on her. You're not trying hard enough. So at the back of her mind would have been this idea that she just needed to try harder. She committed to this relationship. she's already had a failed relationship and she needs to try harder and make it work. And then there's the fear of regret. If I leave, I'll regret it. It may be that Daniel we know that he was using while he was with Malehya. And maybe he said to her, if you leave me, I'm not going to be able to control this at all. Because that's the sort of guilt trips they do. If you leave, this could be it for me. So there's going to be this fear that her leaving could result in some sort of harm coming to him. There could be a fear that if she leaves, that he is going to just go way heavier with the rugs, and it'll be her fault if something goes wrong. And of course, there's also going to be that fear of never having another relationship. Because you can bet that he would have worked so hard at pointing out all her flaws over the time that they were together, so that she would start to believe that no one else is ever going to want to be in a relationship with her, because she is so flawed as an individual. She probably reached a point where she believed that part of her worth came from being with him, being in a relationship with him. And without that relationship, she was nothing. But then, of course, you have also the fear of the impact on the children. How will it damage them if I take them away? And like I said, Daniel probably blamed the perceived behaviours from Lily and Jack on her taking them away from Cody. So he would have really pushed that. Your children are so naughty because you took them away from their father when they were little and he had nothing to do with them. So she probably had this belief that even though he was over-disciplining these children, although in her mind he wasn't, but she probably had this belief that at least they had a father figure and that maybe they would go completely off the rails if they did not have that support there. And the belief that how would it affect Meadow? Because Meadow had this father who dearly loved her. So all this screwy stuff going on in her head where she can't see the reality of it, but instead see Daniel's fantasy version of it. Malehya herself came from a broken home. So she would look at the way that impacted on her and think, this is going to impact on my children, as opposed to looking at the damage that was occurring on a daily basis to her children because of the neglect and the abuse. Now, a few weeks ago, I added another video to the collection that was basically additional parts of Malehya's interview that hadn't been included in the interview, but which had popped up in separate news reports. And when I saw this picture, my initial thought was, wow, look at that black eye. However, as I went through the video, I noticed that actually when you can see both eyes, they both look like that. To me, when I look at Malehya in this picture, the only possibilities here are that is a black eye, where someone has punched her in the face, or she's into rugs as well. When I look at her skin, it makes me think, yes, she's probably into rugs. And let's be real, Malehya wasn't working. So somebody who also liked that same sort of thing was providing them for her. Either that or they were spending all her money that she got for the kids on it. But either way, I believe that part of the reason that Malehya stayed was because she didn't want to lose those little treats that she was getting from Daniel. And I'd imagine that alongside that was a knowledge that that sort of thing probably wouldn't be tolerated in Paddy's house or Cindy's house. So that even short term going there would have meant she wouldn't have been able to use any of those things, if indeed that was something that she did use quite frequently. I mean, let's be real, there are people who will sell their children so that they can get these things. There was speculation with Summer Wells that maybe that's what happened with Summer in terms of Don Wells and his usage. So yes, for Malehya, the availability of rugs may have been one of the things that kept her there. Then of course, in situations like this, there is this tendency to minimise it. This is what normal relationships are like. People do hit bad times in their relationships. So this not understanding that the toxicity that exists is not normal. And in her mind, she would minimise it and be like, well, every couple has their problems. In terms of how Daniel was disciplining the kids, another thing that she potentially minimised may be that she was told by Janie, well, this is how Daniel was raised and he turned out fine. We heard Durwood minimising it, talking about how, in his mind, there's nothing wrong with spanking a kid. And he was saying that in relation to Daniel, essentially saying it's just that old-fashioned way of doing it and there's nothing wrong with it. So it is quite possible that in her head, Malehya had minimised the treatment that her children were receiving, thinking it's because they're so naughty, it's because Lily screams so much, it's because Jack lets the chickens out, it's because this is how Daniel was raised, this is how it's done in the country. And of course, alongside that, this wouldn't happen if I tried harder. This wouldn't happen if the children actually tried to behave. This is what she would have been trained to believe. And then alongside that whole idea of staying is easier than leaving, there would have been this sense of, I can't make it on my own. The fear of being alone, because she's been isolated. So there would be that fear that her friends don't want to speak to her anymore because she's cut them out for the last 2-3 years. The fear that she's not going to be in another relationship. She's going to be alone. She's going to be trying to do this on her own. And it's that learned helplessness. The not having learned the tools to function as an adult. And I think that shows with Malehya. I don't think she ever did learn the tools to function as an adult. And I think that's something that she's probably aware of. And that was probably something that was holding her back. And the feeling that she's not good enough, that she's a failure, because these are things that would have been put in her head on a daily basis while she was with Daniel. That's how the coercive control works. You bring them down to the point where they feel that they are worthless, that they are incapable of achieving anything, so that there would be this feeling of defeat even before trying. She's been isolated and cut off from all the resources that she would have had. She's been gaslit to the point where she believed that she was incompetent and helpless, so that there was that sense of defeat before she even tried. in her mind she knew she was going to fail, so she wasn't going to even try it. And still with the minimising, the convincing herself it's not that bad. Other people put up with much worse things in their relationships. I just need to work harder at the relationship. So basically, in her head, minimising what things are like, avoiding being totally honest with herself and seeing what is really happening. And with that, she would be placing greater weight on the good moments. Oh, it's not that bad. Look at all these things that he does for me. It's not that bad. When he's not stressed out like this, he just treats me so well. It's not that bad. He's just stressed out because he's only working 1 day a week. And I did kind of cover this when I was talking about the new baby on the scene and how wanting to stay for the sake of the baby. There would also be this sense of it's going to hurt the children if I leave. We heard Daniel say that Lily and Jack called him Dad. And I could believe that. Because even though you get the over-discipline and everything else, when he first started that relationship with Malehya, if you remember, Malehya said to Belinda there was a relationship before Daniel, and she said that it didn't work because she didn't think that he was going to be right for the children or something like that. He wasn't committed to the children. So you can bet that in that initial love-bombing holiday honeymoon period, that in order to win Malehya over, that Daniel would have encouraged the children to call him Dad, that he would have initially been like the cool guy who got along really, really well with the children. I believe things probably only started to change when Meadow came along. It's that Cinderella effect that you get so often in these relationships, where the new partner basically creates this image of themselves as super dad in order to get the relationship going in the first place. And gradually that facade goes down. And then all of a sudden, there's a child that comes along that belongs to both those parents, and the facade is totally gone. And suddenly, these children get the over-discipline, they get the negativity. But they've already been trained to call him Dad. So in Malehya's eyes, he is like their dad. He's the only dad they know. So there would have been this sense that it's going to hurt them. It's going to traumatise them if we separate. And she's just completely ignoring the complex trauma that they were experiencing living on that property. So for Malehya, all these lies that she's told herself about why she couldn't leave Daniel, they come from a place of trauma, a place of shame, a place of codependency. Malehya doesn't have a past that would allow her to see herself in a positive light unless she's in a codependent relationship. She hasn't gone to university. She doesn't have a profession. She's not someone who's been married, worked a high-paying job, and then her marriage has fallen apart and she's gotten with this loser. She's not someone who's been out on her own and living independently and then got with this loser. She has gone from living with her parents. Her parents were split up. She's lived with Cindy. She's moved in with her grandmother. Sounds like from there she's then moved in with Cody. When her and Cody split up, it sounds like she got into a new relationship pretty quickly. And then when that relationship fell apart, straight away she got into a relationship with Daniel. It seems that when she moved out, after being with Cody, she moved in with Cindy first, I believe, and then moved in with her grandmother. So she's never learnt her own capabilities. She's never learnt that actually she doesn't need other people to be a worthwhile person. She doesn't need other people to be a good mother. She's always had that codependency. And living in that situation, she wouldn't have seen the long-term results of separating from Daniel, because she doesn't have the life experience to understand that actually she could cope on her own without Daniel. To understand that she could parent those children on her own without Daniel. And at the end of the day, we have seen how very manipulative Daniel can be. And he can put on this front of Mr. Nice Guy, who's buddies with everybody. He puts on this act. And I suspect that Malehya was so afraid of change, of making changes, so afraid of being alone, that she was willing to see Daniel with the mask on, basically. That in her eyes, that's the Daniel she was with. But let's be realistic here too. From what I can see of Malehya, I do believe that she is somewhat narcissistic. So for her, it would have been important to be able to show off this cute baby on her hip. To be able to say that she's in this great relationship. I believe that she did choose to put her own needs ahead of those of her children, and that it was much easier for her to stay with Daniel rather than to have to go into the world and start acting like a responsible adult. Malehya had the opportunity a few months earlier to leave. Cindy and Wade got a U-Haul, and Malehya turned around and said, "No, I'm not leaving now." She put herself, she put Daniel, and she put Meadow all ahead of Lily and Jack. Because despite all these things that I've just gone through in this video, I can't help feeling that she chose to ignore what life was like for Lily and Jack because it suited her better to stay in that relationship. She chose to ignore what was going on with Lily and Jack because she wanted to put Daniel and Meadow ahead of them. Maybe it's unfair of me, based on the psychology of all this, to criticise her for not leaving and taking her children to safety. But to me, the bottom line is these children were being hurt. These children were being abused. These children were being neglected. And she made the choice. She chose to stay there and allow that to continue. Is it unfair of me to judge her in this way based on everything I've just said in this video? Maybe it is. It is my personal opinion. And it is one where I recognise the psychology behind her decision to stay, behind her continuing to put her children at risk. But the part of me that looks at these children's faces every day when I work on a video, the part of me that looks at those bruises on Jack, the part of me that sees the fridge lock, that sees how skinny Lily had become, the part of me that has seen so many cases where mothers have chosen to stay with an abusive partner and it's resulted in the death of a child. That part of me says it is not okay. That part of me says Malehya should have made the right choice. And that part of me cannot forgive her for not making the right choice, for putting Daniel, herself and Meadow ahead of the well-being of Lily and Jack. When I've been creating images to use in my videos and creating the split screens where I've had an image of Lily on one side and an image of Jack on the other side, what I found was that I have far more images of Lily than I do of Jack. Is that because Malehya wasn't taking photos of Jack? Or at least wasn't putting photos of Jack on Facebook when he had visible injuries? Because we know this photo didn't come from Malehya. This photo was on the school's webpage from when the children went on an excursion in December. We see all these photos of Jack where he just looks so sad. And it's a deep sadness that you should not see in the eyes of a 3-year-old, 4-year-old child. This photo, Jack would have only just turned 4. It would have been, a month past his 4th birthday when this photo was taken. I can understand the psychology behind why Malehya stayed. I can understand why it was so hard for her to leave. This is something that happens on a daily basis with people who are in coercive, abusive relationships. What I can't understand is how any mother could look at the face of their child and see so much pain, so much sadness, and these injuries, and not want to remove that child from the situation that's causing that. It's human nature to be afraid of change. And for so many people, sometimes it does take a major shove to get you to make that change, to get you to leave that partner or quit that job where you are absolutely miserable. Sometimes it takes you reaching the point of no return before you can act. But when it comes to children, when children are involved, I just cannot understand how someone could look their child in the face when their child has these injuries. How someone could look their child in the face when their child has this deep sadness that goes right to their core, and not decide that that is the end of the road. That's where this ends. That's where the changes need to begin. CPS were involved with this family. So Malehya knew that she couldn't minimise what was happening to her children. She had professionals telling her, this is not right. This is abuse. This is neglect. And yet she still couldn't make the right choice. Yes, we've seen exactly how manipulating Daniel can be. But apparently Malehya believed her own lies, all the lies that she told herself about why she couldn't leave. And yet she never clearly looked in the faces of her own children. Lily and Jack's story needs to be told, not just for the sake of Lily and Jack, so that they can be brought home, so that there can be justice served, but also for other children so that maybe down the track some mother realises that her choice to stay could cost the life of her child. Because I doubt Malehya ever thought that staying would have led to this, because she would have minimised it in her head on a daily basis. But her number one job was to be a mother. She brought those children into the world. It was her job to keep them safe. And if that meant leaving a relationship where her children were not safe, she should have made that choice. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I know I've just had a bit of a rant there. Now, this is a very emotive subject, so I am going to ask people to be respectful in the comments section. Yes, I do believe that Malehya made a very bad choice and that she is culpable for what happened for her children. She should have, the moment he laid hands on Jack, she should have left. And I know I'm not the only one that gets fired up over this, so I understand that. But if we can try and be respectful towards each other in the comments section, and just try and keep in mind the psychology behind this. I don't think it excuses Malehya, but it at least helps us to understand how we got here in the first place. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button. Let's get this video out there into the algorithm. So thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.